Hey guys, welcome back for another video. It has been 3+ years since I did a full PC build. Seriously, it seems like maybe a year or so. The one I built back then, still kicking strong. I have upgraded it slightly. As the years went by, I added a new GPU, upgraded the CPU, and upgraded the storage because my uses have changed over the years. I'm gonna go through this. This is gonna be a long video, but I'm gonna break it down into sections. We're gonna do unboxings of each thing. I'm gonna tell you about each thing and why I chose it. I'm gonna talk about the overall design and what I'm going for, what you guys might wanna think about when you're choosing different components and parts, especially different things that work together or not, and we're going to build it. This is gonna take me a few days. I'm just gonna have fun with it because this part of the process is seriously the most fun. I enjoy building even more than I enjoy using. No joke. So let's kick into it. So one of the first things that you have to decide on is your case. It's gonna house everything. It's gonna be what you see most of all. Now I am not an anti-RGB person. There is quite a bit of RGB built into some of this stuff here, but I am also not a pro RGB person. So I specifically got the non-RGB versions of some of these parts if that was an option. And for those that have it built in anyway, I really don't use much of it, if any. So the case I chose, I wanted to look simple. I like modern, classic looking designs. The case I'm using now is an older Corsair, but it fit the bill. I had a very specific set of reasons for it. I'm opened up this time though, because this is the first time ever. I mean, I've been building PCs since 1990, maybe 89, and this is the first one ever with no optical drive. So man, does that free you up as far as your case design goes. This is a mid-sized tower from Lian. It's the PC011 Dynamic Edition, which is designed by a famous overclocker, Devour, and it is simply designed to look great and be ultra flexible, specifically for water cooling, whether it's a custom loop or an AIO or multiple of any combination should you wish. It can do everything. It's got a ton of features. We'll go over that in detail, but it has full tempered glass front and side to show off whatever you put in it. So if you are doing an RGB build, this or one of the other variations of the 011 series might really be up your alley, and they're not expensive. They also, this is, like I said, is the medium size. They have a larger version, an ROG edition. They have now a small mini edition. They have multiple redesigned editions of the mid tower. They've got a Razer edition with even more RGB and underlighting. They've got a PCMR edition that looks great in silver, all kinds of different stuff. So check that out. I highly recommend the series. Fans are important and sometimes a critical choice. Like I said, I'm going non-RGB, so these are just straight fans. I have been a big fan of Noctua for many years. I use them in a whole bunch of stuff, from a couple of the amplifiers and my AV rack in the home theater to computers over the years, for one simple reason. They are truly silent. You have to put your ear right up next to them to ever know they're working, and they can be blowing like crazy, cooling whatever you want. These are the Chromax edition, and they are just straight black, and they come with these anti-vibration pads on the corners in multiple colors, hence the name Chromax. So these ended up being about 22 a piece. A little expensive for a fan, especially with no RGB built in. There are many addressable RGB fans out there for way less, but they're not silent. And that's important enough to me to pay the little bit of extra, even though I'm just paying for the color black, because the standard fans are an ugly brownish tan combo. This is also my first AMD build in I can't remember how long. I believe the last CPU I used from AMD was, I want to say, an XP 2600 or 1900. I'm not even 100% sure. It has been 20+ years. Anyway, we're going with Ryzen, and this particular chip is not going to be the final one in this computer. If you're watching this video when it came out, Well, you know what's going on in the world and the incredible shortage of components, GPUs and CPUs especially. It took me so long to source just these two components. I had some delays on the other stuff too, but I've been shopping and collecting this stuff, well, since late October, so over 3 weeks. Anyway, this was my plan B. This is a Ryzen 5800. And it's a great CPU. It's an 8-core, 16-thread, boosts way up there. If I was just concerned about gaming, I'd be done. This is gonna give top-notch performance, especially in 4K. In 4K, just for gaming, it really doesn't really matter which of the new Ryzen 5000 series you're using, 56, 8, 9, or 5950. They're all gonna give about the same performance in 4K. You're GPU bound. But I do other stuff too. I do a lot of video work, and I do use extra cores when I can use them. And right now I have a 8700 Intel, which is a 6-core, 12-thread, so more the merrier. Anyway, this is, like I said, plan B. I have a 5900 that I just bought today. It's gonna take about a week to get here, and I don't wanna wait. So we're gonna put this in, and we're gonna build, and we're gonna have some fun. But as soon as that 5900 gets in, it's going in, and that's a 12-core, 24-thread. And I have a pre-order in for the 5950, but who knows when they're gonna come in stock. And I've been trying to inventory snipe those for weeks now. Haven't been successful, but that will be the end game. Eventually, this will be running a 5950 whenever I get it. But I know the 5900 is coming in, and that will be more than good enough. Going from that to the 5950 is simply bragging rights, just saying it. The 5900 is already going to be more than I need. I'll be totally happy with that. But this is a place setter, so it'll allow us to build, and that's the job it's going to do right now. Now, like I said earlier, storage is something that I had upgraded or changed in my existing system over the years because what I have done has changed. Years ago, I started my own photography business 13 years ago now. And when I built the system after starting the company for that, and I figured out my workflow and what I needed to do, I needed a lot of fast internal storage. So I was running RAID 0 arrays and an external backup on a Drobo. And as the years progressed, my needs changed as I took on video. And long story short, I went completely solid state in my current production system using a Synology NAS for all my large file storage and backup off the computer. But I'm using 2 drives because back then they were super expensive. I'm using a 980 Pro as my boot drive, but it's only half a terabyte. That was still like $400 at the time. And then I have a 2 terabyte SATA drive, or SATA drive, however you say it, for the remainder of storage for games and some apps and just temporary space and ingestion and all that kind of good stuff. I got tired of, number one, the speed difference between the two, because there is a huge speed difference. You get that initial burst of great speed, but after like 3 seconds of transfer or work, you're back to the base level, and it sucks. So I wanted to stay as fast as possible. It does make a huge difference when you're working. Now, Ryzen 5000 and corresponding motherboard has PCIe 4, and there are now M.2 drives using it for even more speed than the 980 Pro. This is currently the fastest drive on the market and in one of the largest formats, a 2 terabyte M.2 PCIe 4 drive. And this is the Sabrent Rocket Edition. So all in all, not too pricey, $400. Well worth it if you use the snot out of it, which I will. So this is gonna do everything. It's gonna be the only drive, and it's gonna be direct mounted on the motherboard. Memory is super critical, especially on Zen 3, the new 5000 CPU platforms. It can take advantage of everything you can throw at it, both raw speed and, most importantly, your timings. Now, AMD is not promising, but strongly suggesting that you can use up to PC4000, giving you a 1-to-1-to-1 clock on the Infinity fabric, which is controlled by your RAM speed. So that's what I got. Whether we hit it or not, it's gonna really depend on the silicon lottery. If you get a really good CPU, it's probably gonna hit it. If not, you back down to 3800 and you're gonna be still ripping fast. Now these are just regular old RAM, non-RGB. They do have RGB versions of these for about $20 more a set. This is 32 gigs worth. I'm gonna be populating all 4 lanes. It does make a slight difference. Benchmarks have shown about a 10% difference. These are top of the line memory and they're Samsung chips, so they're not gonna be holding me back at all. And they are cast latency 16 as well. They weren't too bad, about $250 for the whole shebang. The power supply down there, it's an EVGA Supernova, same series I've been running in my current system, and I believe if my one prior to that didn't have that, I had one at one time. I might have upgraded the size, the output of that at one time, but I've been using the EVGAs forever. It's one of those things where back in the day, it was important, like I said, to make sure you got from a reputable manufacturer and you didn't want your power supply producing unclean power or blowing up after a certain number of years. These things are rock solid, they're silent, they're fully modular, they're not very expensive. That's all I need to know. You just buy by wattage. You don't want to go too far above the wattage you need because that affects your efficiency. You want to be as close to what you're actually going to be using as possible, and the efficiency increases. So it just saves you a little bit of money if your computer's on 24/7, especially if it's loaded up. So when it's not pulling too much power, fan shuts off, stays nice and silent, you don't hear a thing. If you can't tell, silence is very important to me. The loudest thing on my current system is the tiniest bit of whisper of air coming in the front vent. That's it. So I'm going for a very quiet build. Now this is the Republic of Gaming, or ROG build, and it's the Strix, which is the second from the top of the line platform. It has, frankly, more features than I'm going to need, but it has all of them that I want. What you're looking for, it can be a little complicated which motherboard is going to be the best. For example, most mid to upper level motherboards have multiple M.2 slots. You can put multiple SSD drives on the motherboard. However, sometimes they're not all the same standard. For example, this one. I'm just using one drive, so it really doesn't matter to me. But if you are going to be using 2 M.2 drives, and you want them both to be the new superfast PCIe 4, this won't work for you because the second slot is only PCIe 3, and that's very common. So you just have to really pay attention to the specs. Number of USB outputs is also very important to me. I have a lot of exterior peripherals because I do a lot of VR. I've got an external DAC, I've got pedals, I've got a USB hub, I've got an ingestion station. A lot of stuff has to plug in. Now I do have some of that plugging into the back of the monitor and its port. I also have a monitor, or a port in my keyboard, but still I want everything to the back. So I want to make sure that I had enough USB ports and the right types of ports, because now you're going to find 3 or 4 different USB standards on one motherboard. And you just have to figure out, okay, here's all the equipment I have, here's what I might want in the future. Am I gonna have it all to plug directly in, or am I gonna have to buy a hub? Am I gonna have to expand off one of my peripherals? You just have to look. But this one fit the bill for me. It is a very robust series. The Strix series is gonna allow you to overclock with ease. It has a very robust power section, great cooling, looks fine. It doesn't have any weird looking graphics. Again, I wasn't looking for anything overstated. And it's just rock solid. I'm a big fan of the series. My current video card is the ROG Strix 1080i. I have no problem with the company whatsoever. So this is what I went with. They do have one slightly upgraded version, and I believe it's called the H, and it includes Wi-Fi. So if you are using it in a wireless environment, just get that, and it's all the same features for like an extra 30 bucks or so. In retrospect, I probably should have got that just for convenience, but luckily I saved myself because I'm going to be doing this build in here. This is my dining room because my production system is not going anywhere until this is 100% transferred, copied, working as duplicate, etc. And I don't have an Ethernet port in the dining room, but luckily I have a junk drawer, and I have pretty much any kind of gadget, cable, and wire you can think of from the past 20 years. And I found a USB Wi-Fi adapter. So I'll be able to set this computer up in here, no problemo. Down yonder, you see the cooler on the very bottom. It's the Liquid Freezer 2 360. It is a triple 120 fan, thick, or normal size these days. It used to be called the thick radiator. And it performs exceptionally well. It benchmarks and tests head and shoulders above almost all the competition, very reasonably priced, and it has one cool feature that's pretty important. It has a built-in fan to the pump itself. One of the drawbacks to using an all-in-one or AIO cooling water or water cooling solution is there's no airflow because there's no CPU fan. So you're limited to whatever's coming through your case from any case fans, a little bit of the draw, usually out from your radiator fans, that kind of thing. Maybe some from your GPU, but that's hot air. So what they did here is they added a tiny little fan, and hopefully it's silent. If not, we'll have to make some adjustments. And they put it right on the pump, and that is to cool everything right around your CPU socket, like your power system. So that's important because that particular section of the motherboards on the Ryzen 5000 series does get hot. So I specifically wanted this because it had the fan. Next up, really the powerhouse of this system when it comes to gaming and video rendering is the top of the line 3090 video card in the world, the new AORUS Xtreme. This has the most binned GPU from NVIDIA, overclocked to the max out of the box, and they guarantee it's going to go even further with exceptional cooling. It is not only the fastest, but the biggest card on the market. It is a 4-slot design, and that is something you have to plan for. Luckily, I have just enough space on this motherboard and more than enough space in the case, but most configurations will not have that much space. So you do need to measure things out. Most cards alone, let alone 3090s, are 2 to 3 slot at the most. 3080s, I don't believe any of them go above 2. There might be some they call 2.5, so it kind of takes up 3, but they're not that big. This is a legit 4. Now I am using one expansion card, which is something weird. It's in my current system right now, so I can't show it to you, but it is a ultra fast Wi-Fi card, and that's used for my VR. That sends and receives signals to my head unit. And luckily it's a 1x slot card, so I can put it in any of the slots, and I can go in the very bottom one and give myself a full slot clearance, even though this is a 4-slot card, because you do want to maintain clearance for the intake cooling fans. That being said, it's got some awesome features. Now I haven't even unboxed all this stuff. I want to surprise myself, but I know it has a cool little screen, a little monitor on the graphics card. I don't know if I'm going to use it or not, but you can do a bunch of stuff with it. I might have it display the GPU temp or load. I don't know. You can do a whole bunch of stuff. You can put GIFs on it. You can put custom text, pictures, whatever. But it's so big, it's got a freaking monitor. And there's actually a couple more coming out. I don't know if they're in stores yet, but I've seen them. One's, this is an LCD. There's another one with a little like clip-on LCD, and then there's one with a little OLED screen. So cards are getting big, but this sucker's really big. And then last but not least, this right here is the reason for all of this. And I'm not kidding. This is the new, I hope, do-it-all monitor from Gigabyte. It was kind of hard to get. And it's going to be my first entry into high speed. I have been using 60 hertz monitors since the days after the first flat panels came out. I went from a 21-inch CRT to a crappy flat panel, and I have never, ever had anything more than that. This is 144 hertz. It has FreeSync, it has G-Sync, it has HDR, wide gamut. It's ultra curved. It's a VA panel, 1 millisecond response. It has everything. For the first time, there is a professional grade with good color, great black levels that I can use while I'm editing, and it has all the gaming features. And it's big. It's a 34-inch ultra-wide, which I love. I have a 34-inch ultra-wide right now, but it's a professional Dell, and it's only 60 hertz. This is why I had to upgrade, because right now my system does everything I throw at it at 60 hertz. But even if I put this monitor on my current system, it wouldn't do me any good because I'm barely getting 60 hertz. So this is what it takes going to the next step. Hope it's worth it. So let's start with this monster of a case, the PC011 Dynamic. Obviously it's unboxed, but all I've done so far is take out the little accessory box that was stuffed in one of the drive bays. Let's take a look. So its primary feature is the edgeless glass all the way to the edges, both side and front panels. They look absolutely gorgeous. I can't tell yet if they have a slight tint or not because there's still film on both sides of the glass for protection. And I want to say it doesn't have any tint. You do see these built-in bezels around. They are baked into the glass, and that's a good thing. You wouldn't want it all clear because then you'd see the edges of the metal in the frame and stuff like that. So we have a multitude of magnetic dust filters, one for each section of vent, 2 on the sides, 1 on the top, and 1 on the bottom, right here. Obviously they can go on the inside or outside depending on if you're doing an intake or exhaust. I haven't 100% figured out how I'm gonna lay mine out. I think I'll probably do a radiator, triple fan on top exhausting, and a triple fan intake on the side. But this case is so versatile, you can do pretty much whatever you want. It supports triple 140 fan or 120 fans up top, along with the side or the bottom, in any combination of AIOs, air cooling, although they do have a specific air cooling version that changes the front glass for vents where you can put even more fans if you'd like. But let's take a look inside. To get inside, we've got 2 captured knurled thumb screws that take off the top panel, and that unlocks everything. So now we can just take off the 2 glass panels, and they simply lift up and out. What we have on the other side is foam protection and little tab feet that go into slots in the bottom, and these little tiny metal hooks that go into rails to keep everything in place. Same with the front. Spoiler alert, I just peeled back a corner on both sides and there is no tint, so it is clear glass. That's important for people if they're doing a big RGB build. Sometimes the glass can get so dark and tinted that things don't really show up. So no worries here, everything is gonna pop. So it's a standard, almost all aluminum case with just a couple plastic parts in it for like drive trays. But let's take a look in the accessory box here. Got a bunch of screws and some Velcro cable organizers, love these, and a rubber block. I have absolutely no clue what this is. It's got some adhesive on one side, and it's just a really super squishy rubber block. Let me take a look through the instructions real quick, see if I can figure that out. Aha. All right, so the block is for a very unique feature that I think pretty much nobody in the world is going to use. I'll get to that in a second. But it goes to show how versatile this thing is. And what's interesting is the mini version is even more customizable. That thing changes like a transformer. It really is freaking cool. I mean, stuff slides and moves around and reconfigures. This has some of that though. Now, inside, we have a lot of things that are completely optional and some things that I'll just be taking out, like these 2.5-inch drive bays right here, not drive bays, drive caddies, drive slots, whatever you want to call it, places to mount your drive. Just a little thumb screw here, and obviously these install virtually anywhere you want if you want to, and you can get more of these. If you have a ton of drives, maybe you're building a big Plex server, you can put these here. You can put them on the back. You can put them in the center, all kinds of places. You could probably even mount them up top. So that clears space down here, and these are aluminum. We've got our motherboard tray here, which is, I believe, removable. We'll check that out a little bit later. But this wide open space up top is for your radiator. And one difference between this and the Mini is shrunk in all dimensions. And while this has support for triples everywhere, some of the slots in the Mini only support duals. So check that out. And you can put an ATX case, ATX motherboard in the Mini case. You can configure it that way, but it changes other configurations. So that's why I obviously have the 3090 card, full-size motherboard, and triple radiator, so I needed the regular size. All right, so in the back here, pretty simple. Another knurled thumb screw, and this opens a cover to one of two kind of universal bays. First use here is for the power supply. This is where you're typically going to put it. And this is what separates this from some of the other cases out there that typically put this in what's called the basement, which is here in front of the motherboard or slightly below the motherboard. And sometimes they'll just have a panel covering it up. What they did with this design is they made the whole thing wider, and you're putting it in a completely separate chamber behind the motherboard. You don't see any of this. You don't see any of the wires. Everything is snaked behind and just poking out where it needs to. Super clean, no need for a cover panel, lots more room where it's needed for cooling. But here's the cool thing about this case. This has two bays, and you can put in two power supplies, and that's what this insulation block is for. You attach this in between so you don't have any contact or vibration between the power supplies, and it actually is kind of like a little standoff. But we won't be doing that. We're just going to be using one standard power supply, and you can put it in either top or bottom configuration, whichever you like. By standard, inside here are two 3.5-inch drive bays. So it not only supports 2.5, it supports 3.5, and you can also put 2.5 in here as well. You can also just remove this whole mechanism if you like. I may, just to make it look a little cleaner, but you don't have to. So around the back here, panel comes off the same way, except this one's aluminum. It's got the little tabs here that go into the slots. And you saw it had the cooling openings for the intake for where the power supply would be, either here or here. And this is that whole drive caddy that you can take out. Here is your space for either fans or a radiator. Triple support for 120 or 140 built in. This is a not only cover plate, but for wire organization. Two more knurled screws. Oh, and I got one down there I need to remove. I need a screwdriver for. And out comes this. Here we have all the cables that are going to our front panel, USB ports, and button controls. Optional to connect, of course. I usually do not attach these because I use an external card reader and USB hub, but they are there if you need them, and plenty of room for all the cable management you need. You can be as sloppy as you like, and that cover is just gonna cover everything up, and airflow does not matter because this is just sitting in its own stable little pocket. Speaking of the front, here we have, it's kind of like brushed aluminum. It's got a striation to it. We've got our power button, two USB type A ports, headphones, microphone, and a USB type C. We'll keep that on just until we're done with the build. And then down below, we have these rubber standoffs here, and these are the only plastic part of the case. Everything else is metal. Let's unbox the motherboard. This is the ASUS ROG Strix 8570F. They have a lot of different motherboards, and it all depends on which one has all the features you need, which is going to be the best buy for you. Strix and Crosshair are their top two levels, made for very robust overclocking and can pretty much do whatever you want to throw at it. The Crosshair has a lot of features that I'm just not going to be using in this build, so the Strix was more than good enough. We have the board itself, and under the cardboard, we've got some documentation. We've got a door hanger. Got some zip ties. Looks like some fan extensions. A whole bunch of those. Some SATA cables. That appears to be some kind of temp sensor. Some standoffs. And some stickers and a driver disc. Okay. So standard stuff in there. I'm actually surprised there wasn't more hardware. Now, like I said, it's been about 3 years since I built, but I got a box full of screws and standoffs and extra parts and all that kind of good stuff with my last motherboard. Not so with this guy. Taking a look. Should be a fairly understated board. I didn't want anything that was themed or super RGB or super flashy or anything like that. And what we have here is just good design. Now note, there is a cooling fan on here, and that is true of most of the X570 boards. The stuff just runs so dang hot, they have gone back to active cooling on the board. Now there are a couple that don't have that. If you especially need it extra silent and you want it completely passive, you're gonna have to hunt that out. That's not too common these days, at least not yet. We've got a built-in I/O shield. That is something that should have been done years ago. Love it. It's probably a reset there. I think this one has a dual BIOS. I'll confirm later. And it is pretty simple. It's just extremely robust. We do have 4 slots for RAM. We've got our power connection. We have the legacy wiring connections going back decades. I really wish they would do something about all of that. Like I said, my video card is a 4-slot design. 1, 2, 3, 4. That means I can't do SLI with it. That means I can't even use this 1x for my ultra high-speed Wi-Fi card for VR. It's gonna have to go down here because you can't block the intake fans, which would be right about here. So make sure you're aware of the exact layout of whatever you're getting and what you're gonna use to choose the best card. We have tons of heat sinks around the power MOSFETs and totally beefy design. And like I said, my cooler has a little fan on it that will circulate the air right around this area, keeping that nice and steady. Now under these two heat shields here, these should be heat sinks. These are for, let me grab my screwdriver. These are for the M.2 drives. With PCIe 4 M.2 drives, they require a heatsink because they run that hot. I have the 980 Pro, which is a version 3 in my current system, and it doesn't require a heatsink. It gets a little warm, but nothing unusual. Certainly nothing needing any kind of active heat control. That does not want to come out. I don't want to force it. I haven't opened the manual yet to see how that comes off. I assumed it would just slide, but maybe this whole thing has to come off. Anyway, that's where your M.2 drives are going to go. Now, if your motherboard doesn't have one, I'm going to assume that every PCIe 4 motherboard with a M.2 slot is going to have a heatsink, but some companies like Sabrent also sell their own, and it's actually a heat pipe and passive aluminum cooler. So just bear that in mind and make sure you're getting what you need. We've got plenty of connectivity tons of SATA ports, which for the first time ever, I will not be using any of. Wow, that is pretty cool. But if you want to run RAID arrays, you are all set right there with everything built in. USB ports are important to me. We do have 2 built-in HDMI ports if your CPU has built-in graphics. And this will give me 7 USB high-speed ports, and I will probably be using 6 of them, if not 7. And then we have a USB Type-C port, which I don't think I have anything peripheral-wise that will plug into that. Everything I use with that is just for charging only, but not connectivity. We've got a SPDIF out, if you're into digital audio, the standard surround sound analog outputs, and the Gigabit Ethernet. I think it's Gigabit, it might be 10 Gigabit. I'll have to verify that as well. And then this should be the reset button. And this slot here is special. This is one of the newer motherboards out there that can be flashed from as far as the firmware, with a USB drive. And that's what this slot here is for. You can plug a USB drive with a special format, and the motherboard doesn't even have to be connected to anything else. You don't even need a CPU in it. You can update the firmware. That's important because if you're using the Ryzen 5000 series, most motherboards, if they're older, even some 570s, will require you to have an older Zen 1 or Zen 2 CPU installed to update to flash the firmware in order to support the new Zen 3 chips. So make sure whatever motherboard you get, if you're going to the new Zen 3 chips, that either it's already flashed, and this is, or if you don't already have an older chip that you can temporarily use, it supports USB flash feature. Otherwise, you're gonna have to buy an older chip just to flash it, just to use your current chip. All right, so verifying with the manual, this is not a reset button, it's a BIOS flashback button. There's a little tiny dip switch in there. This is configured with 2 completely independent BIOSes. So if you screw one up, you can flip over and use the other one and overwrite to get yourself back in the running. So this panel here unscrews with these 2 screws, and then you can get to the last screw to get off this heatsink for the M.2 slot. Now this is one board where only the top one is PCIe 4, the second one is only PCIe 3. Luckily I'm only using the 1 drive, so that is fine. But if you need 2 PCIe 4 drives, make sure that your motherboard supports it on both of its internal slots. And there we can see it right there. Next up, storage. This is the 2 terabyte Rocket NVMe 4.0 edition from Sabrent. Current top of the heap. If you want performance, this is what you get. And I have to say, for $400, it's probably going to win the award for the most underwhelming product. Let's get this guy open here. See what's inside. Wow, that does not want to open. There we go. All right, so we've got a little info booklet. And this is the heatsink that they sell if your motherboard doesn't have one. It's freaking huge. I've seen photos on their website. No need for that. And that should be all that's in here, maybe some warranty stuff. No, it's all about the heatsink. Okay, well, I know how to install a drive. Here we go. And then we have the drive itself. And it is double-sided. That's all there is to it. Not too exciting. And I will probably never see it again. It's just going to go in there, live under its heatsink, and be really fast. Likewise, the RAM, not too much to be excited about here. It is non-RGB, so it's just going to be some nice beefy sticks. These are 8 gig modules, so I can populate all 4 of my motherboard slots. And they actually look almost identical to the ones that I have in my current system, which are, I'm gonna have to double check. I wanna say they're probably 3200 in there. So in the last few years, we've had some speed developments. It's interesting to see the speed get faster and the latency get horrible. I remember buying high performance cast latency 8 and 9 DIMMs. That was like back in the day what you were going for, the ultra high speed, ultra low latency. But these guys here just have a solid heatsink and no frills, no lights, no nothing. It's just gonna go in there and disappear. And again, be really fast. Our case fans, again, simple, no frills, just going for the best performance possible. Excellent airflow and as silent as it gets. So what we have here is a all black fan itself. Of course, pulse width modulated. Each one comes with a detachable extension in case you don't need it. And we've got like a rubber shroud over the cables here. And the fan itself, it's got these little notches here for better airflow and silence. It's interesting to see the different blade designs year to year. Back in the day, man, you just had what looked like a little turbine and they were straight blades and there wasn't too much to them. Now they've got all kinds of different variable angles, variable thicknesses, compound curves. Some have dimples. Some are starting to do like the golf ball pattern, which is patented, by the way. So they're trying to come up with their own methods of doing that kind of design. And then what you have are these rubber pads. There should be some more of them in this box here for anti-vibration. Now the stock Noctua fans, they're like a cream with ugly brown corner pads and they really stick out. If you don't care about it, if it's something you're never gonna see, well, that's fine, save some money. But if you want it to look good because it's gonna be seen, they make you spend a little bit more. And these just allow you to customize the exact color combos that you want. So I'm gonna be using black, and I'll put on these pads on all four corners, but they've got red, blue, green, white, and yellow should you decide to go that way. And again, non-RGB. And they also believe they have RGB versions. Don't quote me on that. I didn't look too much into their product line past looking for this model here. So there you go. And these were about 22 and change at their lowest price, and that's what I got them for. Our CPU just for this initial build to get things running. Again, not going to be too much interesting in here because every Ryzen Zen 3 chip except the lowest 5600 comes without a cooler. So it's literally an empty box for nothing. A little info and warranty packet, nothing there. A sticker and the chip itself. Look at all those little pretty pins. Wow, it's been a long time. I'm used to pads. Okay, that's all there is to it. Here's our beefy cooler tested on top of the heap as far as performance and silence. So this means you don't have to replace the fans if you don't want to, which is extra cost, which I've had to do frequently on past systems. I'm running a very good Corsair right now in my current build, but it's the second Corsair I had. In the first one, I did replace the fans. The current generation has nice silent fans, which I'm sure these will be too. And according to all the videos I saw on it, they certainly were. Let's take a look at this guy. We have a box of brackets and mounts, I'm sure. Feels like the pump end down here. It is. And a big warning. Peel the label before use. Oh, I will. Have no fear. That looks cool. Nice little impeller there. Okay, I was wondering what kind of fan it would be. It's kind of an axial. It's not a traditional pusher fan. So that's cool. It's going to blow out the sides here. And then protective film over the pump itself. Standard addressable power connector. And then in here, we've got the radiator and fan combo. Back in the day, This would have been called thick. It's now quite normal. Surprisingly, not too heavy. Ones I've used in the past, this size would have been a lot heavier to pick up, but look at how thick that radiator is. And again, this is now the standard. That's beefy. Nice looking fins. Nothing out of the ordinary on this design here. All black. Love the fan blade design. They're scooped, they're scalloped, and they're swirled. And there's protective film on each of the logos there. Very cool. I don't think they're bearingless because they do feel, oh, they might be brushed. I'm not sure, but they feel very smooth. Just a little Arctic branding there. So there you go. I love the fittings here. High quality. It's, I'm sure not chrome, but it's got a chrome look to it. Beefy lines, and I love this kind of wrapping they do over the lines. The actual coolant flow is probably half this diameter, but you know what? It looks cool. And I'm not sure if there is lighting or RGB on this or not. I'm sure there probably is something, like a light up logo at the very least, but I didn't even research that. Usually if there is, I turn it off. The one I have on now, I just have a little bit of red on, and that's it. And then inside the goodie box, we have barcode to the manual. We've got mounting brackets and a thank you card. And in here are all the different back plates and screw links and standoffs that you'll need for the various generations and chipsets that you can mount this to. And it does support everything current. The beefy, actually quite heavy power supply here. Now I think part of this might be from extras in the box. Yeah, look at all that. So fully modular and decent looking wrapped cables here in a polyester sleeve. It's fairly tight. I don't like them when they're bunched or loose, I mean, because they get kind of bunched up. This looks fine. I have no problem with this. Of course, if you want custom cables, you can order that. They use standard connectors as usual. And we just have the plethora, I mean the bottomless pit here of cables this thing's gonna come with. You are gonna be able to design any system you want with something like this. And then we've got some more Velcro for cable ties. We've got some mounting screws for the case. We've got a manual. The series goes between 550 and 850. And they just give you the general specs. And then the unit itself, let's see how heavy is that? Oh wow, that is half the weight. So there you go. Yeah, not heavy at all. Very surprisingly light, actually. Just a huge fan. Oh, there's that smell. That new electronics smell. When I was a kid and you'd get anything electronic, I remember very distinctly my first Commodore 64. And I say first because we went through 7 of them before they stopped blowing up after you turned it on. This smell came out of that box like you wouldn't believe. Oh, it smells so good. It takes me back. Surprisingly, nothing else I've unboxed so far has had this smell. So it's something to do. You know what? My recent 2 amplifiers I got for my home theater also had the smell. I think it has something to do with the power supply, like maybe the transformer. But anyway, I love this smell. Almost as good as a humidor. What we have here is an on-off switch and an eco mode on or off switch. The eco mode, I believe, is called silent mode in other brands. So basically when it's not under load, the fan does not spin. So 0 noise. That's what I've been running for years, and I'm sure that's what I'll run here. I will not be tapping out to 850 watts. I'm sure I'll be close to 700 with a 3090 in there, fully maxed out. But I love eco modes. I love the silent modes. There's no reason at idle to have that fan spinning for no reason and just making noise. Now this is just an 80 plus gold. My current one's an 80 plus platinum, and I just didn't care about the little extra savings a year. It's an efficiency rating, basically. It's like buying an air conditioner. I don't know how many of you are homeowners, but when you buy an air conditioner, you spend extra to buy a more efficient unit. It won't cool any better. It'll get you the same temperature, but it'll cost less to run. And that's all this efficiency rating does. And gold is, I mean, it sounds impressive, but it's actually either the lowest or one of the lowest ratings out there. But you're talking dollars a year. Who cares? And we've got all our standard ports here on the one panel. And that's it to the power supply. Here is the one that I've been waiting for today. This is the new 3090 AORUS Xtreme edition. This is the top of the line, most bin GPU, meaning the actual chip tested far and above every other chip. So they put the very best of the best in this one particular line. And then they have several lines below it that can only clock, I mean, they're still really fast, just not quite as fast. And yes, you do pay stupid premiums to go from one to the next, even though there's a very small difference. No, financially speaking, does not make any sense to do so. Buy the Founders Edition, buy the non-overclocked one, the standard. That is by far the best value. But I got it, so why not? Okay, so let's take a look at this guy. This is actually like a mini suitcase. You got like a little carrying handle here. This is absolutely huge. It's not only heavy, but the box itself, it's bigger than the motherboard box. Okay. How does this come undone? There we go. Oh, it's magnetic. Wow. This top flap is magnetic. Too cool. Inside, and again, this is freaking heavy. This is a big card. Card itself is heavier than anything except the monitor. Well, the case. It's close. Got an info packet here. Wow, and that's it. Just one card. It's a quick guide card and a warranty. All right, don't need that. That's interesting. Does this do anything? It's a little, does it move? It's a little Xtreme guy. It's rubber. I thought it was hard plastic, but it's like a really firm rubber. Yeah, he's kind of posable. Oh, it's a rubber band. There we go. Oh! Oops, sorry, buddy. What happened? There we go. Legs don't move. Arms move. Arms come off. Okay, well, I don't really get that. Maybe it's a anime thing, not into it. But, okay, you get him, whatever you want to do with him. We've got, this is probably a case badge, yep. A little, is it metal? No, wow, it's plastic. I expected metal. I got metal with my last one. But here's what is the only thing in this box I give a crap about. Oh my God, that's heavy. That's the only thing in here. Let me check real quick. Shouldn't be any cables. I'm not sure if it comes with an SLI bridge or not. I think those are all extra these days. Yep, okay, that's it. So back in the day, I'm trying to remember if I ever got an NVIDIA card that didn't come with an SLI bridge. But these days, because it's a pretty much, I mean, like 99% dead technology, nobody gives a crap about it. In fact, the 3090s are the only cards that even can do it. They removed the hardware from the 3070 and 3080 series. So if you, for some reason, still want to do SLI, you've got to go all the way and get two 3090s and then spend extra for an SLI bridge. And they're not even in the same position, card to card. So you have to get exactly two cards. You can't even mix and match anymore. Like I said, dead technology. Forget about SLI. Man, how do I take this out? Oh, this thing is heavier than my dog. Got stuff falling out here. Port plugs. All right, completely wrapped in protective film. And what do we have here? I'm gonna wait until I do the build to actually unwrap everything and go through all that. Oh, that is gorgeous. The metal itself is not pure silver. It's got kind of like a rose gold tint to it. And so do the heat pipes. It's actually more of a copper look. The base plates are copper, but even the fins, I think it's the reflection off the copper. It gives it that rose gold look to it. Look at all those heat pipes, and they are big ones. 3 8-pin power connectors. Like I said, this thing is beefy, and it's made to overclock, even beyond what it does from the factory. And here is the little SLI bridge on this particular model. That little protective rubber thing that could stay off. All of these I can take off now. Little port plugs just for keep crap out for shipping. So we have 3 HDMIs and 3 display ports. I do not know if all 6 can be activated at the same time, but I know that all 3 of each can at least be activated at the same time. So triple monitor for sure. Not sure about 6 or more than 3. We have triple fans, and one thing that makes this card unique and why it's so expensive is the cooling solution. The 3090 itself, they're all the same basic architecture. When you pay for a third-party card, what you're really paying for is, number one, a binned chip, so it can overclock faster, and they've already tested it to know. And then what kind of cooling design it has. This one just went for huge. These heat sinks actually go down to halfway through this shroud here. So that's 2 inches of heat sinks and heat pipes, and cooling fins. And then you have triple fans on top of that. And these are counter-rotating fans. These 2 operate this way, while this one goes in the opposite direction for best airflow. And it's freaking silent, even under load. This thing just whispers. And again, that's something that I have no problem paying for. Silence is golden, and I value it. Not everybody does, so the Founders Editions, which are noticeably louder, but cool just fine, don't overclock as much, but at stock speeds, the only difference is the sound. Not everybody cares, but there you go. There's the AORUS 3090 Xtreme. Love it. Oh, where is that screen? Oh, there it is. I didn't see it under the film. So this is LCD. This is a big LCD screen that you can put a whole bunch of different stuff on. So the card will be coming out the side, and there's RGB all over the place. I can't tell exactly where it is, but I know it's in this back etching and in these sections here, and I know it's somewhere around the edges, but it's got RGB all over the place. I think, it's hard to tell. I've seen some videos, and yeah, it can get crazy. But yeah, this is all screen here. That looks really cool. All right, so let's get to building. Now I'm gonna unbox the monitor last just because I wanna show it in action. So we'll do that after everything is done. First thing I'm gonna do is figure out if I need to change out these stock brackets for my cooler. So I'm gonna open up those instructions and read all about it. And I think I'm just gonna do a montage. Enjoy. Hey guys, just a couple quick things. I didn't want to interrupt the montage. This is from the future like magic. First of all, you'll see there's no CPU installed. My 5900 came in the middle of the build, so the 5800 just came out, sold it to a local guy. This will be right from the start with the 5900. That's change number 1. 2, you'll see me not connect my front panel headers. My current case has them on top, and I just never use them. These are nice and convenient, so I changed my mind and went ahead and routed that, so all of my USBs are now connected. I didn't connect the LED ring that's around the power button because I don't care for that status light. That's the drive activity and power light, so you'll see me strip those down. Second, I decided to change how I'm going to route my fans. This motherboard has plentiful fan headers. They're spread all around the board, along with dedicated CPU, CPU, AIO, and water pump headers. Check your motherboard for exactly what you have and what they all do, because they're all different. In this case, this board has a combination of Q-controlled and set 100 speed headers. Some are 1 amp, some are 3 amp, so make sure you're plugging into the right thing. Now, instead of just using a whole bunch of fan extension cables and plugging each fan into all the individual headers and running a lot of messy wires, I got this guy, and it just came in today. This is a simple 5-way pulse width modulated splitter. These are like $5 all over the place on Amazon and other places online. You'll notice one thing, it says CPU and then the rest say fan. They're all fan. That's just bad Chinese engineering, marketing, whatever you want to call it. But make sure that you plug your first device into the very first one, because that's the only one that gets the speed reported back to the motherboard. Otherwise, you might think it's not working. So I'm going to plug this into a single case fan header, and then all the fans will plug directly into this back here where it's nice and clean, so we won't have any cables running all around. That's it. Enjoy the montage. So here we have it. That was awesome. Very glad to be done with the build. It was a lot of fun, but now comes the hard part. That was all super easy. The tweaking, the setup, the overclocking, the testing, and that in almost an endless loop. I don't know if I'll do a separate video on that. There's a lot to it, and every system is a little different, but I'm gonna get the best performance with 100% stability that I possibly can. I've run the 3D Mark, the VR Mark, and the PC Mark on the old system in its best condition. It's an 8700D lidded, overclocked to 4.7 on all cores with a Strix 1080 Ti. With just the factory overclock, I didn't find great stability pushing it any further. So I have my real benchmark, new versus old. And after I get everything all done, I'll run that again. That's not something you actually validate changes with. You just use 3D Mark and other stuff for that. But that's gonna take days, and then I get to set up Windows again and all that good stuff, and I'm doing the first fresh install I've done in years. I mean, it's been at least 32-bit Windows Vista. I've upgraded from that about 5 times to my current system, so time for a freshie. But I'm gonna do a BIOS update on this one before I even fire it up, because since the start of this build, it's already had 2 updates to the motherboard BIOS. We do that simply with a flash drive. This is a nice model with the BIOS flash, so you don't even need to go into Windows or even boot the computer. You don't even need a CPU in the motherboard to update it. And we simply do that by using the special USB port in the back, and this thing is really heavy now with everything in it. Oh man, especially the glass. We simply plug in the power supply. Plug in the USB drive to the one particular BIOS port. Power on the power supply, but don't turn on the computer. Hold down the BIOS update button, and we should see a light. There, it started to blink, and now it's reading. It's going to go through its update process completely automatically. After 5 to 10 minutes, the light will shut off and it will be successful. That's it. All right, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun. Oh, the monitor. Hang on. All right, before I get into the monitor, I've just fast forwarded several days. That was a ton of work. Well worth it. Well worth it. I am done with the, well, 95% done with the tweaking and tuning and all that good stuff. The big projects are done, however. Got a lot to talk about here in the wrap up. I know that most of you just wanted to see the build montage or hear about the parts, so I'm gonna give you the too long didn't read version right now, and then for those interested, you can stick around for the rest. Absolutely in awe of the overall performance. CPU and especially GPU just blew my expectations out of the water, more than doubled almost every aspect of my old system, which was no slouch. There were some surprises along the way, good and bad. Not everything is roses, however, but overall, highly recommended. Yeah, it's another league, let me put it that way. So let's get into the nitty-gritty details. I'll start with the monitor. Obviously been using it now for many hours, both in gaming and benchmark and general desktop use, and just getting used to it. And wow, what a great monitor. I don't even have to say for the price it's a great monitor. It's just a flat out great monitor. This is competing with monitors more than twice its price. That's as simple as it gets. It's $400, just under $400, and they're just trying to disrupt the market. I believe the panel is shared by another brand that's more common out of the US, but this Gigabyte brand is what's using this panel here in the US at the $400 price point. It is almost perfect. It's missing some features. Don't get me wrong. It's not a top end or luxury or frills model. It is very much a no frills monitor. But if it has the specs that you want, like me, it's great. So there's no RGB on it. There is no USB hub on it. There's only input connections. There is no swivel. There's only tilt and height. This is as high as it goes. That's fine for me. It's the same height as my current monitor, and it's pretty typical. There are quite a few monitors out there, especially the more expensive ones, that go higher, of course. Picture quality, overall, absolutely love it. If you're coming from IPS and you need full screen photo editing, what you're probably not doing anyway on an ultra wide. I'm one of the rare photographers that I know that like an ultra wide to begin with. Most are either on a 4K or a 1440p, more traditional aspect ratio. And they're traditionally using IPS displays, of course. But this has a very slight shift in not so much the color itself, but kind of the brightness and contrast at the same time. It almost looks like a bright shadow. And that's if you go too far off axis, either horizontally or vertically. Seriously though, if you're just using it for normal desktop use, any kind of normal content on the screen other than a plain dark background, you can't even see it. I notice it, for example, if I have a large window or full screen Facebook in dark mode or any app that's in dark mode, you're gonna notice it. It's slight, but it's there. IPS doesn't have that. That's pretty much it. That is the only fault. And if you're doing any kind of video editing, not an issue because you're not editing on a full screen preview. And even if you are, you're not editing a constant plain background like you may with photography, you know, black background or white background or whatever. For normal desktop use, 10 out of 10. The HDR isn't as good as like a TV because it's not a local dimming array panel. Those are very rare for computer monitors. Most are edge dimming or full backing. So what that means is if you have a very bright source right next to a black source, you're not going to get the incredible contrast ratio between the two like you will on a great TV. It's going to be noticeable, but this is only advertised as a HDR 400 unit, and it does live up to that. Things can get noticeably brighter than SDR, and the blacks are especially great. This panel has fantastic black levels and a corresponding great contrast ratio. And that's what I really noticed first thing compared to my IPS, which is a great monitor, but they don't have that great of a black level. This is fantastic. So overall, love it. It's pulling 144 refresh, no problem. And with this hardware, I can't even get games to dip below 144. You know, this isn't 4K, it's somewhere around 3K, so you do have an advantage where your hardware is going to be able to give you higher frame rates. So going with 144 refresh on a display this size is a great match. All right, so that's the monitor. It has speakers built in and they're not terrible. They're on par with the average laptop. They go very loud and you know, they don't have any bass and they don't have great highs, but it's very clear and all kinds of dialogue, any content consumption like YouTube, movies, anything like that. No problem, exactly like playing back on a decent laptop. And I was surprised. I also didn't know that audio goes through DisplayPort. I thought it was only through HDMI, but I'm connected here via DisplayPort and boom, just works. So highly recommended, especially for under 400 bucks. Only downside, like the GPU and the CPU and well, the RAM and a whole bunch of other stuff, it's almost impossible to get because it's back ordered. But if you see it, snag it. All right, so that's the monitor. Overall system, I have a cheat list here of topics because, man, I've been going through a lot of stuff. I have seriously spent at least 30 hours tweaking and tuning and setting up and figuring out settings and getting things to run properly and working out bugs. There are some bugs in both hardware and software I'll get to, compatibility issues, all kinds of stuff. You know, it's easy to watch these build videos, and they're a lot of fun to watch, where big tech tubers will build a cool system and throw Windows on there, and yeah, so we're done. BS. That's the easy part. That's the tip of the iceberg. The real work comes after it's done, and you actually get it working to the best of its ability. That's where the real time comes in. So, bottom line, I got a really, really good overclock on the CPU. GPU, it is overclocked as far as it can possibly go from the factory. This is the AORUS Xtreme 3090, on par with the ASUS Strix 3090, both the ultra binned NVIDIA 3090 chips. They are running as fast as they possibly can, and it's boosting to 1980 megahertz. Out of the box, no manual overclock. That's what it comes with. So they are giving you such a huge overclock. Stock is what, 1640, something like that? That is such a huge factory overclock, it's not even funny. Temps on the GPU staying under 65. Fantastic cooler on this card. Relatively quiet too. That's what really amazed me. The fans only really spin up during stress tests and benchmarks. For normal gaming, they're really quiet. And for normal desktop use, they shut off, 100% silent. Great card, have to say. The CPU. So if you're like me and you're coming from the Intel world, oh, there's a steep learning curve. So Intel, when you overclock a CPU, it's really simple. You've got your base clock, which typically stays whatever the stock is. You don't touch it. You got your multiplier, and you've got your voltage. So you're just playing with the multiplier, getting that as high as it'll go without crashing, and maybe adding a little voltage to get it stable at its, ragged edge. That's pretty much it. It is a very fast, very simple process, and there are some automated tools to just click, wait, and done. On a laptop, you might go the other way. You might keep the stock multiplier and undervolt to get better battery life. And that's it. I mean, that is as simple as Intel gets, and the rest just works. AMD. It depends on your CPU. It depends on your motherboard model, and especially your BIOS revision, how many things, how many options there are to tweak. On this particular combo, there are no less than 40. From all kinds of different voltages, from all kinds of different voltage controls, methodologies. The CPU overclock has 3 different types of options. You can use it stock, and they call it precision boost. It sounds like something extra, but it's not. That's just stock. Out of the box, if you just plug it in and go without changing anything, it will automatically manage its speeds for you. Intel does the same thing now, but this has something built in called Precision Boost Overdrive. That is something extra. And there are different types now of Precision Boost Overdrive. This BIOS has been updated with the very latest. It has all the options. It can not only boost higher than the rated specs from AMD, it will do it more often and hold them longer for more overall performance. And it can dynamically undervolt at the same time, letting it all do it even more because it's very related to heat on AMD's. Intel's, not so much. They're going to boost and they're going to produce whatever heat they produce. With AMD's, they're going to boost and they're also going to be watching their heat. And if they have more heat available to give off, they'll keep boosting. So bottom line, I'm using the new Precision Boost Overdrive 2. It is running a 200 overclock maximum. It is getting up to 5.15 gigahertz on single-threaded, single-core tasks, 4.65 on all cores all the time simultaneously. Temps are staying under 85 under max stress test loads. Normal gaming staying under 70. And that's running a -15 curve optimizer per core. So it's constantly trying to keep voltage as low as possible on each core to keep heat down to allow it to boost even more. fantastic performance. CPU, can't say enough good things about it. I have canceled my order for the 5950. I'm not going to be getting any better single core performance, so I'm totally happy with this. I still do a little bit of stuff like Photoshop work, like some Adobe Premiere work that is dependent on single core performance. So that is important to me. That's why I didn't just do an all core overclock, which is the second way you can overclock this. You can do it just like an Intel. And oh, by the way, using Precision Boost Overdrive is using the same type of algorithm as the stock Precision Boost. I wish they would have used a different name because there's nothing special about it. But what that does is allows each core to operate independently at all times. So when you get a program running that needs a single core, it'll boost that one single core farther than it could boosting all of the cores at once. So it's really the best of both worlds, kind of, because you can do a manual overclock of all cores at the same, a little bit higher than it would on its own, because it has that little bit of a safety margin. And doing a manual overclock, I was able to get 4.7 on all cores all the time. The drawback to that is you're locked in. It doesn't drop, number one, so you're always producing more heat, so idle temps are higher. And you never get that single core boost higher than whatever you have it set to. So I'm missing out from 4.7 to over 5.1. So I do prefer the Precision Boost Overdrive, either version 1 or version 2. Difference between version 1 and version 2 is that curve optimizer. So it's just an additional boost. And what I found was, without using the new version with the curve optimizer, the multi-core was only getting about 4.5. So it went from 4.5 to 4.6.5 by using that dynamic undervolting built in. So it's well worth doing because it really does help all your performance all the time, no matter what type of task you're doing. And that took a long, long time to dial in because seriously, dozens of variables and options. And every time you change something, it's a reboot and it's a test, trying to get it to crash, doing benchmarks to see if it made it better or worse. There are no guides, there are no instructions. I watched every video about overclocking and tweaking and tuning these. I read every forum post, every blog article, and I learned one thing out of all of it. Nobody's an expert. I'm not kidding. For every single setting, there's one guy, one major tech tuber, one overclocker that'll say, set it this way. And there's another guy that'll say, set it the other way. And there's another guy that says, never touch that setting, leave it on auto. I'm not kidding. Every single setting. You look at anybody's guides, compare them. Differences all over the place. No rhyme or reason. They all think, this is why I did it this way. This is why. I can't even tell you why every setting that I ended up on works the best, because it's just trial and error. It took me that many hours, trial and error, one thing at a time. Did it crash? Okay, not that setting. Try the next one. Did it crash? No. Okay, get a benchmark reading. Next one. Did it crash? On and on and on and on. Just took forever. So that's how I did it. And it's not even, is that still on? No, it's not. It's not even worth telling you exactly what settings I ended up with, because they're going to be completely different to yours, because it depends, again, on your motherboard and your BIOS version especially. So it's worth the time to take if you can do it, but do not expect to just go and find a guide for your particular chip and plug in these settings like there are for Intel. That's easy to do for Intel. Doesn't work with AMD. And also, each physical chip is different because they all have different tolerances. And there are a lot of settings that depend on that tolerance. For example, there might be a enhancer setting, and there might be 5 levels of enhancement for a certain setting. And which one depends on how good of a chip copy you got. So you might work with level 3, but the tech tuber you watch got level 4, but it crashes on yours, and you're not going to know that that's responsible for the crash. So It sucks, but that's what you have to go through. So enough about that. In the end, awesome performance. RAM overclocking, that's a big thing now with Ryzen. The next generation, Zen 3, 5000 series chips. AMD is claiming that you should be able to, they're not guaranteeing, but you should be able to get 4000 megahertz RAM, DDR 4000, PC 4000, which means if you're linked one-to-one with your Infinity Fabric, it should be able to run at 2000. This is very dependent on the BIOS revision, and this is a beta version. I do expect it to change in the future, but as it stands right now, my Infinity Fabric, and it also depends on, again, how good of a copy of a chip you received, mine is only hitting 1900, which is still an overclock, but it's only hitting 1900. So I'm running my RAM at 3800 to maintain that one-to-one. It goes to 4000, no problemo. And that's at 1.4 volts, what the RAM is rated for. It's not pushing it at all. They also have a 4400 version that can run at 1.5 volts. I have no doubt this particular kit would also boost greater than 4000. However, there was a performance hit running the RAM higher than the Infinity Fabric, because once you get off that sync, there's latency. If the Infinity Fabric and the RAM are linked, you get perfect performance. If the RAM's running a little higher, it has to catch up. And that little bit of a catch up affects overall performance worse than the speed boost. So I just underclocked the RAM from its maximum to match what the chip can do, and that gave the best performance numbers. Now the RAM itself, I had put in 4 sticks of 8 gigs, and I knew that was a gamble. It didn't work. What I didn't know, I didn't know if it would reach 4000, which it did. But what I didn't know is this particular motherboard, at least on this BIOS revision, again, may change in the future, does not work with 4 sticks of high-speed RAM. You can put in 4 sticks at 3200, what it's rated for, but it will not overclock beyond that. So I have 2 sticks in right now. I've just got 16 gigs in right now, and I have a 32 gig 2-stick kit on the way to replace these. So if you have a motherboard and you're gonna go above 16 gigs, what you need to do, because there aren't a lot of high speed, high capacity 2-stick kits out there. It's easy to go 4, not easy to go 2. And what you need to do is download the qualified vendor list, the QVL, for your motherboard. And that's a crapshoot too, because they're often way out of date. The motherboard manufacturers will physically buy or get in for testing all these different RAM kits. And they will test them and see what works and what doesn't on their motherboards. The problem is they're testing usually at an older motherboard BIOS revision. They don't retest all 500 kits that they may have for every single BIOS revision on every single motherboard. So it is a crapshoot. If you see your kit on there, and some of them, like this ASUS list, this is the kit, and we tested it in 1 slot, we tested it in 2 slots, and we tested it in 4 slots. Here's what works, here's what may not. If it works, you're good. If you see it on that list, you're good. You can confidently buy that particular kit and plug it in, and you know it's gonna work. The problem is when you get something bleeding edge. This is a brand new kit, just hit the market. They've never tested it, let alone qualified it on 1, 2, or 4 slots. So it was a complete shot in the dark. But if you study the list, you can glean some other information. And what I noticed was their 4-slot compatibility just stops once you get above mostly 3200. There were some 3600 kits on there, but only a couple. So bottom line is you need to stick on this motherboard with Ryzen 5000 chips for high speed to 2 sticks. That's coming in a few days, and that should be just a swap. Shouldn't change any of the settings, and bada bing, bada boom. But yeah. Also, I did test the difference between the stock RAM speeds and the 3200 typical set speeds and the higher 3800, and it is noticeable. I did not expect it to be that. I'm just talking Windows. I'm talking launching apps and things like that. So if you can splurge for the extra speed, at least a 3800 set, definitely do it. Speaking of surprised by speed, storage. This particular CPU has 20 PCIe 4 lanes, and 16 go to the GPU, and the remaining 4 go to one of the M.2 slots. So that means the ultra high speed bandwidth is going to my storage device, which is one of the fastest on the planet, the Sabrent 2 terabyte PCIe 4 M.2 drive. And it is very noticeable over PCIe 3. I did not expect that. I expected some better copy transfer numbers, things like that, but I didn't expect any tangible, noticeable difference, and there is. It is almost, not exaggerating, as noticeable when I went from hard drives, granted they were fast hard drives, Western Digital Blacks in RAID 0, to SSD. For those of you that at some point in the past went from mechanical to SSD, you noticed the difference. You're like, wow, yeah, that shaved seconds off, or that's really snappy, that you noticed. Going from my 970 Pro SSD, it's an M.2, it's an NVMe in my current system, to this one was just as noticeable. I couldn't believe it. Launching some apps. On the current system, you click and a second or two later, loading screen or the app comes up. It's really fast. This is so fast that some apps come up as if the window was just minimized. And as soon as you're done clicking, it's up. It is unfreaking real how quick and how big of a difference there is between a fast PCIe 4 and a fast PCIe 3 drive. Well worth it. If you're building a new system, I highly suggest you get a motherboard that supports PCIe 4. Don't get a slightly older one and save a few bucks that only has version 3. It is well worth the extra little bit of money. All right, before I go any further, I'm going to get the big negative out of the way. Major coil whine out of the card. This has been plaguing all of the NVIDIA 30 series cards. This one is no exception. I hope it goes away. I hope it greatly diminishes, because an RMA is not an option. These cards don't exist. I would not be surprised if there are only double-digit numbers of this card, this particular model card, produced in the world. It just doesn't freaking exist. Maybe down the road, next year, 6 months or so, if it's still a problem, I'll be able to RMA it. But for now, I'm going to have to live with it. It's there. But it is quite loud. Fortunately, it's not the typical really high-pitched. It's more of a lower tone, but it's loud. And it happens on all frame rates, any use of the GPU. Sometimes it even comes up going through the Windows lock screen, which I had no idea used any GPU, but it does. So it's there. I mean, down to 30 FPS, 60. You can lock this monitor at different frame rates, 60, 100, 144, all there. G-Sync on or off, all there. Up into the several hundred during benchmarks, still there. It changes tone a little bit, but that's about it. So it's a big problem with the current NVIDIA cards. All brands, all models, doesn't matter. It's a crapshoot. Some people have it, some don't. There are some people out there that say it's gone away after a couple weeks or gotten way better after a couple weeks. I have done hours of benchmarking, and I've run a GPU stress test for 5 hours straight yesterday. Didn't make a difference. So We'll see if it changes in the future. I will, after I finish this video, start running the stress test more and get a day or two on it before I transfer this over to my production room. But it's there. So if you really hate coil whine or can't deal with it or don't want to deal with it, you're going to have to wait months for them to get stock in plentiful supply and fix the issue and be pressing out cards that definitely don't have it, because it is rolling the dice at this point. That is the only big negative that affects any kind of performance. The only other negative, and this truly is almost meaningless, is the graphics card RGB program, and specifically the LCD control program, which are two different things, suck. Horrible. The RGB software is RGB Fusion from AORUS, and it doesn't work, flat out. You can Google how bad it is, and it's not an exaggeration. I'm not going to go into the long explanation of everything I found. Bottom line is it doesn't work right. And at this point, it doesn't even recognize the card. I can do a fresh Windows install again, which I did just to test it, and get it to work. And after installing so many certain programs, it stops recognizing the card. But this may be a hardware issue, but it may be a firmware issue, or it may be an RGB software issue. Only one of the RGB lights on the card even comes on, which I'm glad for, because I didn't want them on anyway, but just the logo on the very top here says AORUS, even comes on or does anything. It defaulted out of the box to rainbow barf, and luckily, just trying to get the software working during my testing, I was able to trip it just to solid red, and it stuck. And it's been that way ever since, but none of the front lights and none of the fan side lights ever lit, even default out of the box. So that may be hardware, but again, totally fine with it, because I was going to turn them off anyway. Now, the LCD screen, unfortunately, you can see it's showing this stupid little chibi egg animation, and it goes through a bunch of other stuff with that little eagle guy. Really annoying. It's, light blue, fairly bright, doesn't go with really anybody's theme unless you're into that kind of thing. That's half the time what it defaults to when it boots. And the other half of the time, it will halfway go to what I programmed it for. Now you launch the RGB software, and there's a button then to launch the LED control software. Two different things, and neither one are designed by AORUS, Gigabyte. The LCD software is just horrendous. When you're in there, in the program, in the RGB software, and you set it, it works. And you can change all different kinds of things that are on the screen. And that worked great while you're in the software. It doesn't persist. It's supposed to, but it doesn't. So I had set it to just solid red, turning off the AORUS logo, and just setting it to show the current GPU temp with the title of GPU temp. And you can customize all the colors, what's on the screen, different, how it reads it out, it's really nice if it worked. But half the time when it boots, it will just show the GPU temp it was at boot and freeze there. And it didn't stick the color. It defaults the display to rainbow barf. Luckily, it's not that bright, so it's not too distracting. But at least it's not moving like the egg, and that's what I hate. I can't stand looking at this egg. It just catches your eye when you're looking at the monitor. So when it's defaulting to a static GPU temp, even though it's a useless GPU temp because it doesn't change, it looks fine. Now, so far, the only really weird thing that I've run into, and I don't know if this is an issue with the system or a combination of things or a software glitch or a driver issue, but launching Doom Eternal with HDR on, even completely stock settings, completely out of the box with the current NVIDIA drivers, crashes as soon as I go into a normal level. The training levels, the tutorial levels will load no problem. But if I turn on the performance metrics and I turn on HDR, I'm getting drop frames and 100% utilization on things randomly left and right. And as soon as you click into the level, PC just shuts off. It's really weird. Doesn't matter what settings you change, it's just the HDR toggle on or off in the game. So I have no idea where that's coming from, but with that off, everything on Ultra Nightmare, it doesn't even begin to dip below 144. Just cruises along, cool as a cucumber, giving you everything you could possibly imagine. So great performance, except for that one glitch. That's it. That is the only weirdness. And like I said, I don't know what's causing it, but it happens stock. So I don't think it has to do anything with the hardware itself. I think it's a driver issue or the game itself or something not optimized for this card yet. I have no idea, but just putting that out there. Now, this is something I admit was my mistake, but something that you might be interested in. I used a lot of programs for benchmarking. You can see some of them on here. 3D Mark is one that I used early on because that's something that's very tolerant. If you get a crash in 3D Mark, you know you're way far off the mark. And I was using that, just the Time Spy demo, to very quickly gauge some of those settings I was talking about earlier. How far off am I? If I get a crash, I know, I'm not close. I'm pretty far off the mark from whatever I was testing, right? Now, at the end of the run, in all the 3D Mark benchmarks, you get stats. And one is a very useful graph, and it shows what your CPU was running at throughout the test. And it's a chart. Every single time, my CPU chart was a flat line showing 3.7 gigahertz. And I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. It wasn't boosting. I wasn't getting, 5 gigahertz or even 4.8 like it's rated for. I wasn't getting anything other than a flat line from start to finish. Even between the GPU and CPU tests, it was running the same. I spent hours figuring out what was wrong. And what was wrong was Time Spy doesn't record anything but the reported BIOS base clock to the report. It wasn't running at 3.7 gigahertz. It was running all over the place. If you run the newer benchmarks, it shows exactly what you're getting. So I didn't know that, and I wasted hours of my time chasing my tail. So bear that in mind if you're using Time Spy, at least on a Ryzen 5000 chip. It's just going to show you your base clock. Ignore it. Run Firestrike. Run the Port Royal, and they report normally. So I think that's going to do it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I would love to have Amazon links down below to stuff, but I'll put them down there, but I'm warning you now, everything is out of stock and everything's going to be out of stock for a long time. In the end, I have right around 4K, give or take, between the monitor and the complete PC. This stuff here, $6 at Walmart because I tried to use my Bluetooth keyboard and mouse and they didn't work. And I thought, well, I've never actually tried a Bluetooth combo to get into a BIOS before. I guess it doesn't work. Yeah, it didn't have batteries in them. Would have worked. Anyway, exceptional performance. You could get it far less for really close by using a 3080 card if they existed. I mean, that would shave off a quarter of the cost right there. Chip wise, single core performance, get yourself a 5600, save a couple hundred there, and you're going to get identical gaming performance. Frankly, if you're in ultra wide or 4K, any of the 5000 chips from the 56 to the 5950 are going to give you identical results in games because you're GPU bound. So it really depends on exactly what you're doing, what you want to spend. Oh, I do want to talk a little bit about the case. I love this case. Not just because it looks great, but wow, the quality is fantastic. I am shocked how good of a sound isolating case this is. Just blew my expectations out of the water. I didn't expect it to be this good given that it's almost 3 years old now as far as the design. it works. Anyone would be a fool not to strongly consider this in a future build. The quietness from the fans, the isolation from even the coil whine is just, I love it. It looks great. It's solid as a rock. Very inexpensive for what you get. So kudos there. Great case. Anyway, that's it. Been long enough, and now I have to edit this monster. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.